safety, right? So these are all very key elements of personal safety education. How do we integrate it into the daily processes of the school? How does everybody get involved? Which means starting with awareness, making sure that every person has the ability to understand what is expected of them, what are the processes that need to be in place, starting from school leaders, which is why all of us are gathered here today. So this isn't something new to Chrysalis at all, because we have always believed in standing up for the child, and it is the core and the essence of everything that we do. Those of you who are familiar with the curriculum and the program know that there are already ways in which personal safety and the ownership and the accountability that students need to bring to the table is already integrated as part of the curriculum. And here are just some of those ways. For example, a look within question that asks them to think about safety. What does it mean to them? What would happen if they are not in a safe situation? How would they respond? Or, for example, take the famous story of Little Red Riding Hood. It's a great way for us to bring in the concept of stranger danger, for example, right? So it's a great opportunity that teachers can use to start having these pertinent discussions with their students. Was it right for Red Riding Hood to talk to the wolf? So kind of planting that seed that if you come across wolves in your life, how would you react? Right? And even things about personal safety, following rules, obeying certain laws that are there, taking even simple things that they can relate to, traffic rules, for example. So, what would happen if you disobeyed these rules? Personal harm could come your way. So, bringing awareness to all these different facets. But it's important that as much as we try to inculcate this culture and this thought process amongst our students and teachers, that everybody in the school ecosystem plays a vital and important role in this process. So just to kind of set the context, to kind of like do a little pep, as we like to say, I'd like us all to just take a couple of moments to reflect. And what are we going to reflect on? We are going to recall a moment where you felt safest and happiest in your life. So just close your eyes maybe and just think about what was that moment for you like. And to go a little bit deeper, think about the different elements that were involved, meaning the different senses that you experience. What was it about the environment that promoted this feeling of safety and happiness for you? Was it certain sounds? Was it certain smells or even a touch? So these are all important things and triggers to think about, because they then manifest in different ways in your own schools. So just take a moment to think about it. If you feel comfortable, you may also put it down in the chat, but it's not compulsory. So while we think about our safe space and what makes us happy, it's a great opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about our panelists. One of our panelists will probably be joining us a little bit shortly. There are some issues, so we will ensure that we try and take care of that. But I'm very pleased to have two of the panelists here. And as I speak, I see that the other panelist has joined, which is fantastic. So welcome to all the panelists here. In fact, one of them is going to be kind of the key facilitator of the entire session itself. So who are our panelists? What do they do? Let's find out a little bit more about them. First up, I'd like to introduce all of you to someone who I've had the pleasure of interacting with over the last couple of months. Ms. Nithya Ramaswamy, welcome, Nithya ji. Nithya ji is an incredible person, as I've come to find out. Just to give you a little bit of context, her passion for personal safety education and child rights really was evident from day one of interacting with her. And it's something that she truly believes is the birthright of every child, to have a safe environment to live, be loved, and to learn, which makes the school system very critical to this success. She is a visionary leader herself, and she's had over 4 decades of experience in the sector, ranging from board governance and organizational change management. She's not only a qualified auditor of the Quality Council of India, but she's also empaneled with CBSE board. And over the years, she has received numerous commendations for her service towards special needs and as a principal herself. For example, she has been awarded at the national level various awards, including Best Principal Award and Leadership Awards. She's also the Lifetime Achievement Awardee of the Rehabilitation Council of India. And she's also currently pursuing her doctorate degree as well, I believe. So Nitya ji, we are thrilled to have you here with us.
Thank you. I wish I had switched off my camera, but they need to know the face behind the voice.
Absolutely.
So it's quite, you feel shy when somebody talks about you. So
not at all. I mean, that is why I'm here. I'm here to do that for you on your behalf. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Yeah.
I'd also like to thank and welcome our second panelist, Ms. Leena Wazirani. She is the head of the preschool divisions of Alpha Kids International. She began her journey as a committed teacher and then moved into curriculum planning, special projects, admission facilitation, teacher training, and setting up the entire preschool process across the international preschool network. She has over 19 years of experience behind her, including higher qualifications in early childcare education and an inherent love for child development. Welcome, Leena ji, and we look forward to hearing.
Morning.
Good morning.
Same here. Thank you so much. Thank you.
No problem at all. Well, thank you so much for making the time despite some of the technical issues that you were facing earlier.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has taught us to overcome all of that, right?
Absolutely. We are all better for it in some sense.
True.
So welcome. And our third and final panelist is Mrs. Preeta Menon. Welcome, Preeta ji. A little bit about her. She holds a master's degree in 3 areas: English, special education, and applied psychology, and is currently principal of Bellwether International School in Nanded. She is passionate about working with students with special needs as well, and is also a trainer in the field of learning disabilities. She has proudly mentored teachers and students over the years, and through this all, she has also been recognized for the work that she's done by several institutions. For example, she's the recipient of the prestigious title of Guru Shrestha by the Navodaya Vidyalaya Samiti and Principal of the Year 2019 by Global Guru. So welcome, Preeta ji, and thank you for taking the time here to be with us.
Thanks a lot.
So having set that context, what's going to happen now is that we have prepared a deck for all of you here that we will be taking you through. And Nitya ji will be leading a large part of that. And during the course of the discussions, Preeta ji and Leena ji will also be adding their thoughts and ideas. Towards the end of the session, we have a focus time where our panelists can share some of the other practices and elements that they have brought into practice in their schools. So we'll be hearing a little bit more about what they are doing in their schools as part of personal safety education, followed by which we will move to the Q&A segment. But before that, just to set a larger context of what we are doing, the core content of what we are taking up during this presentation, the first thing we will be touching upon is key government policies and regulations, just to set in the larger picture of what the rights of the child are when it comes to prevention of sexual harassment. It's also a reminder to all of us that during the course of this webinar, we will be touching upon certain sensitive themes and topics and terminologies. So I would request all of you to ensure that you are in a place where you feel safe, but also where you'll be able to freely listen in and discuss some of these things as well. Post that, we'll also look at child abuse specifically. So what are the types of abuse and how as school leaders we can recognize and prevented. So some of the redressal mechanisms that we will need to put in place. And the role of school leaders as quasi-parents, as Nitya ji has put it. So we will also be looking into how the role of the school leader extends beyond just setting certain processes in place. So with that, on that note, Nitya ji, over to you as we jump into the laws. What are the laws that protect the child, starting with the key or like the mother of all laws that we have, which is our POCSO?
So thank you, Aditya. It was, this is something which is extremely close to my heart. We are all in the domain of education, and we all say that the future of any country, of any nation, or for that matter, the world lies in the hands of a child. And it is necessary that we allow the child to blossom in an environment of care and where they are safe. It's interesting as to why this POCSO Act was even framed in 2012. I'm sure that many of you must have wondered what it is and why 2012. It's because we did have a number of laws which govern the importance and safety of children in our country, but those laws were framed way before independence. And those laws are quite archaic in the current situation. Like, say, for example, I know I'm starting off with a very strong example. If a child was telling a parent or an adult whom he could trust that something went wrong with him and there was somebody, hurting him in his private parts, and the question that was asked to the child was, how were you standing? Were you standing or sitting, or were you lying down? And if the child said, I was lying down, and he said it was pate pay and peat pay. But by mistake, if the child was saying I was lying down pate pay, that means he was stomach down. And in the child's words were not heard at all, because they never did believe at one point of time that even an anal penetration of an object or the penis was an offense for the child. So a mispronunciation has landed so many children in so much of trauma after being asked question after question by adult after adult whom he hasn't seen at all. So when all these things led to a crescendo at one point of time is when the government said, now enough is enough, and we are creating this protection of this particular act, POCSO, which is so important. It's not only against sexual offenses, my dear teacher educators and friends. It is about how do you create a safe environment for children. And that is how the whole saga began. And it is mandatory for all of us, especially in school systems, to have read and understood the act. So Aditya has taken out a few, excerpts from the same for us to just focus on. Nonetheless, I would like all of you to have read the act, point number 1. And point number 2, as leaders, from the chairman to the doorman of your school, everyone has to be aware of this POCSO and act according to the same so that we create a safe, happy environment for the child. So could we move on, Aditya? So the POCSO has categorized punishments, and most important, teachers and leaders, where I take pride in saying, in working with leaders like Miss Preeta or Miss Leena, they are very, very passionate about children. And they do not, when we as a team talk about it, we are very open about it. We cannot run away from saying that there is a sexual assault on a child and it can be penetrative. So it can be a penetrative sexual assault or an aggravated sexual assault when instruments are introduced into a girl child or a boy child. And you will be surprised, educators, to know that when you take a survey, you will find that baby boys are far more assaulted than baby girls. And it is something that nobody pays cognizance to. Baby boys and men and young boy children are as much in danger as young girl children. So the POCSO has categorized them as penetrative and sexual assault and aggravated penetrative assault. It could be any way, and that is imprisonment for 7 years to life, which I still think is a very, very short punishment for those who are offending kids. And the next is sexual assault, where it's aggravated sexual assault, any act with sexual intent involving physical touch except penetration, where the child is assaulted. It is imprisonment. Sexual harassment is up to 3 years, and exposing the child to pornography or abusive sexual material is up to 5 years. But the 7 years is not going to change a person's mindset. If he had the audacity and the gall to attack a child 7 years ago, prison life is not going to make him feel any better. So there is another fight which is going on as to how do you protect children from these kind of pedophiles who will be free after 7 years. How is this mindset going to change is a question that's still lingering. But we as educators, if we teach our children to be safe, then we do not have to really worry about the laws, because we train our kids to be safe. And that is what we need to be sure about. So the most important thing is obligation of media, studio and photographic facilities to report the case. Personnel of media, hotel, lodge, hospital, etc., they will have to report to a juvenile court, and the police finds any material that was in the scene relating to the child. Punishment is there, but unfortunately, we've said it only for 6 months for 2 reasons. One, any law for that matter can be misused. Any law can be, a person can be punished when he's innocent. So in order to avoid that, they have kind of limited the punishment to certain areas, but of course the man would be stamped unsafe for kids in some form. This is very stringently followed overseas. India is yet to reach that stage. And similarly, if nothing, there are some areas where medical examination is insisted upon, and if it is a child of 5, you do not want the child to be, the parent may not want the child to be examined by another stranger, another doctor, after already the trauma that the child has gone in. So there are a lot of legally for us to still protect the child. And so in order to avoid the child to go to that level, it is in your hands to say that I have created a safe environment for my children in my school. Every child knows how to protect himself so that he doesn't even reach the stage of what we are talking about. So anyone can report. It could be a juvenile police unit, it could be local unit, must be given an entry number and recorded in writing. And the child, if in need of care and protection, be forwarded to a shelter home within 24 hours of report. Now you will see that most of these, what I'm reading out, pertains to a number of children who are, I do not like to use this word, street children, but these are children who are most in danger. Those who have no roof over their heads, those who do not have a home to go to, or those who live in very, very dangerous situations. So this applies to most of them. However, if any unfortunate incident happens in any of our school, then we need to follow the same process. And the most important is, friends, if you do not report an offense within 24 hours, then valuable evidence is lost. And when that is done, when that happens, then we've lost the case. Because when you've lost the evidence, there is no way that they are going to take you in good faith. And also we need to be very careful about how we are questioning the child. And most important, the incidents which have happened, whether it was in Bangalore, I'm not mentioning the school names, whether it was in Delhi, I think this inappropriate report by the media aggravated the situation completely. Absolute inappropriate reporting to the media aggravated it. However, there are some times when we have to involve the media, but the school has to be very discreet and the principal has to be very discerning. Very, very important as leaders. So there are these medical examinations of a victim. These are conducted where a woman doctor, if it's a girl child, in the presence of parents or a person of trust, or a woman representative of the institution whom the child trusts, can be done. If it has been as I told you, penetrative assault or sexual assault, this is something which needs to be done to nail the culprit, and necessarily needs to be done within 24 hours. And the most important thing is, unfortunately, there is one thing, parents and teachers and friends, whoever is attending this session, you must remember one thing. The law has a number of loopholes and gray areas where you are assuming that the person is guilty. You assume, and then unless he is completely proven. The other thing is, what happens is persons charged under those offenses which require the existence of such mental state, very often, both in the case of the Bangalore case and in the Delhi case, where the little child was really severely abused, they claimed that the person who abused them was not of sound mental state. So this is another thing which doesn't help us protect the child at all. After the offense is done, there's no point in breaking our head over these things and faulting the law. We have to prevent. Prevention is much better than cure. Prevention is most important, and our focus today is going to be on creating a safe environment and prevention of abuse to children. So, if there are any thoughts, Leena ma'am, if you have any thoughts, or Preeta ma'am, you have any thoughts on this counter, where it is important for us to prevent our children being exposed to strangers. If you could just share a short policy, Preeta ma'am, of our SOP, like how you follow the protocol of how a child is safe from entry to exit, and Leena, especially for early childhood, how do you tell them how to say no and how we protect the children? Just a short excerpt before we proceed.
Ma'am?
Yes, Preeta.
Yeah. Okay. So mine, especially if I say about it's a residential school. So one side, sometimes when I used to think residential school running is a bit more risky than day school. But when I think about the risky factors, especially what I used to do is before sleeping, I make sure that all the doors are closed properly. And it's not easy for a principal to manage, but still before getting up, minimum twice I used to make rounds in each and every hostel. As I am having a duplicate key, I used to open it in between random visits, so that my children, they are aware that principal may come and go at any moment. Even security guards are aware that this principal is not the one who used to sleep peacefully in her quarter. She may visit randomly. This is what I used to make inside the campus, the faith that the children are having, so that my children used to sleep peacefully to an extent. But outside this,
I think Preeta ma'am might be having some technical issues. So while we wait.
Meanwhile, Leena, you could just tell us how you manage your preschool from entry with a careful execution of the SOPs.
So firstly, of course, I would first want to share my thought over safety. Like we always talk about a need, right? And we, at that time, for some reason, we always speak about a physical need. That what is a physical need of a person? Your air, light, food, whatever. So when you look at it, when you talk about safety, that is a mental and an emotional need. Yeah, without safety, one is learning can never take place, because for each one of us, safety would be a priority. Just a very simple question where I obviously don't expect an answer. But say if we are in a space where we do not feel safe, is there anything else that you can think of Do you think learning can happen? Do you think there can be a thought process? Obviously not, right? Because the only thing that you're thinking about is how do I get out of this situation, because I need to keep myself physically safe. Yeah. So there is no way safe without safety. There can be anything that any learning process that can take place. Coming to particularly our preschools, we are extremely careful right from entry point to exit, because we ensure that at no point a child is alone with any of the team members, except for, of course, a teacher. So whether it's the ancillary staff, whether it is the security person, even when our children are taken to the washroom, we ensure that it's never one single person, though it's a female. Yes, because we cannot always say that it's only men. Children can be unsafe even with women. Like Ma'am Nitya spoke very correctly, that it's not just the girls, it's also the boys. Similarly, when it comes to danger from an adult, it could be from a male or a female. Hence, right from the entry point to the exit point, in our schools, we ensure that children are never alone with a team member. And there is always a teaching staff along with the child, whether right from entry, like I said. So at greeting time, the teachers are standing outside. Even in the washroom, the teacher accompanies the ancillary staff who's helping the children, and we ensure that the doors are not shut and there are separate partitions for using the washrooms. Over and above that, in our curriculum also, we incorporate activities where we make sure that children, we make it like a fun activity, that okay, whenever you feel that you're not safe or you're scared, you have a whistle in your pocket, remove the whistle, blow the whistle out, right? So children know that even outside, like I've seen a lot of our preschoolers, when they go out now, they actually carry a whistle in their pocket, so they know that they can blow it to alarm their parents. Yes. And we have activities wherein we ensure that they are mugging up, literally by hearting, though it might not be a great term when it comes to learning, but when it comes to the mobile numbers of their parents, we ensure that they're mugging that up. We ensure we tell them that when you're going down in a building, don't be alone, be with the parents. So those are the kind of activities that we are incorporating in our curriculum in a daily base in the circle time. Thank you. Ms. Preeta, would you like to continue?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, Preeta ma'am, I want you to definitely mention the SOP that you have created when
Yeah.
when there has been some kind of abuse, whether it is bullying or whether it is anything else, how it is reported to you. Like how Leena said, one clear takeaway for the participants will be to enable the child hold a whistle in his hand and blow it when he's not safe. So you also have a system, I know, where you say
Yes.
that when there is a problem, how it is escalated to you and how you find a solution.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, mine is residential come day school. So day school a particular time, I told the children, whatever problems you are having, don't think that it's principal and it's not, she is not someone who is easily accessible. I have given them a particular time when they can come and report anything to me. Other than that, there is a box I kept for the scholars separately. They will be keeping the notes into that. They'll put it, and I make it very sure weekly once I'm attempting to that. And if it is very urgent, I used to call the parents and I used to make them understand the need of taking care of their children. Especially one small incident I'll tell you. One girl child used to go to, after the school, they used to go to the coaching classes. Parents never bothers. Parents, they just want to make the children engage. But what happened is the girl, instead of going to coaching classes, she was just roaming with some other boys. This incident brought to my notice by one of her friends. Immediately, I called the parent, I called the girl, and I made her to understand it's not that simply scolding. Before calling the girl in front of the parents, I made the parents understand that it's the mistake of the parents, not the mistake of the girl alone. Parents should have made the girl to understand the need to attend the classes in a proper way and how to take care of all these unwanted attractions in the society. But parents are not bothered of all these things nowadays, ma'am. That is the main problem. So what I feel is, instead of making the children first understand, there is a very, very need of counseling for the parents, especially mothers are to be counseled rather than fathers, because you know that mothers are having a better hand in the
Yeah, in
life
fact,
of
I think your very same point
yeah.
parents have put in the chat
Yeah.
box that the parents need to be counseled.
Yeah.
That's a very good point when we talk about safety and security, where Leena shared her experience, Preeta ma'am has shared. When I was principal in Mumbai, I remember. Unfortunately, the coaching classes do have a very big predominant role in the fabric of education of Mumbai, and not only Mumbai, elsewhere. And they go meet college students, they meet others. My boys did not use bags, and they didn't even realize that their bags were being used as courier bags, because the children would not use it, open the bag and see. And these would be dropped in their bags, and these children would take it, and then the others will say, another boy will say, come on, open your bag, let me see what's in your bag, and take out the thing. They were like sleeper couriers, not even aware. And one fine day when the police raided, my boys were picked up, and the police came to my school because I was principal, and none of us were aware. Of course, we put it all in place later, but the trauma. Always remember, parents and teachers and educators, we act afterwards. This session is to say that afterwards never happens. Yes. How do we take it now is what we're talking about. And in all our school systems, whether it is the preschools or high school, we have a very, very strong SOPs to follow, which Aditya will be sharing a little later, the flowchart to all of you. If you don't have any further questions, we'll move on to the next part of the session. There's a lot of chat. I haven't checked though.
And even for residential children, I have introduced the ID card system, without which no parent will be able to meet, even if it is father or mother, they should bring the ID card, because the security gate, people may be getting changed. So we may be aware of the parents and all, but security, we have given strict instruction. Without that ID card, no parent will be entertained.
Correct. So could we move on, Aditya?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So we've looked at POCSO, we've looked at the key government policies that are in place and are necessary. And as Nitya ji has already said, it's very critical that from the chairman to the doorman, everybody is aware of the act and the policy. Now we're going to go a little more granular into the nature of abuse itself, the types of abuse, and very importantly, what is the role of the school leader when it comes to recognizing and taking necessary action as well. Nitya ji?
Yeah, we'll start from what do I say? The one abuse that is not, though people keep discussing about it, but which is still not attended to, especially when it comes to children, is the biggest myth is that we think children are abused by strangers. But trust me, the perpetrator is someone the parent or the child knows and is often trusted by the child and the family. I hate to say this, but all of us who are attending this session, maybe there are 100 participants. According to research, it says 20% of us would have been abused in some way or the other. When you look back, when I told you, when Aditya began the session, he said, think of the moment when you felt very safe. You can now think of a moment when you felt very creepy. There are some looks which would have made you feel creepy. There are some touches which would have made you feel uncomfortable. Definitely, definitely. And it is very strange if any one of you say, no, kabhi bhi nahi hua, then I'm happy for you. However, if you say, yes, ma'am, I've been through that. I felt that touch was unsafe. I felt somebody else brushing past my body part. I felt somebody else touching me in an inappropriate way in my bikini area. That is the most important, educators, is to have the courage to say that, yes, I have been abused. Since I have been abused, I'm not going to allow a single child to be abused ever. That must be the courage of conviction with which you attend, instead of trying to brush things under the carpet. It's okay. We are all, for that matter, we are all, we are basically animals. Unfortunately, an animal has sex only when it wants to procreate. It eats and hunts only when it is hungry. It attacks only when it feels threatened. However, we, although belong to the animal kingdom, do none of this. Even when we do not want to procreate, we want to have it as a pleasure. And that is when people become victim, when they are not ready for the partnership. If it is with consent, it's a different ballgame altogether. So the myth about sexual abuse has to be broken. It has to be discussed threadbare without feeling shy about talking about anything. That is very, very important. Move to the next one, please. Now, when you look at it, like who amongst us is really standing up for the child? Now, if you really think, and these are data from UNESCO, UNICEF, across the world, 2 out of 3 children are physically abused, and every second child has faced emotional abuse, even at home. When you tell the child, I'm not going to talk to you, don't even look at my face, don't come here, daddy will go out of home, mommy will go out of home. The way we talk, the choice of words, we get angry, and our manifestation of our anger on the child is hitting the child, shouting at the child. So there is no way you can say that none of us have been abused in one form or the other. You may have a very safe parent home, but the neighborhood may not have been very kind to you. Of the 69% physically abused children, 54% have been boys who have faced this. And especially beating boys children is like, and they keep saying, Rona mat, don't cry like a girl, which is so incorrect. There was a gender bias even in abuse. And there is parental situations where there is abuse. Parents don't realize, I don't think any parent will wantonly hurt a child, but they don't realize what they're doing. The intent may be correct, but the action may be wrong. And say, I told you, 50% of any population would have faced one or more form of sexual abuse. We will not be able to share for whatever reasons. It could have been your uncle who touched you in your private part. It could have been somebody else who brushed past your breast or touched your bottoms or touched your penis, whatever. But we would not have had the courage to say that uncle did or grandfather did or grandmother did. What? Some relationship would have come in between. And if somebody tells me, like today, when I train my staff, I have the courage to say, yes, when I would go, I belong to Chennai. I grew up here as a child. I know when I went in PTC, I know I have been touched inappropriately. And then we learn to cover ourselves and we would cover. That is not correct. And we would be very scared to tell our parents. And when we all grow up, and even today, when a girl child wears a skirt or a sleeveless blouse, they'll say, if you dress like this is what will happen, which is not correct. You cannot justify any kind of abuse or any kind of touch. And of course, the worst affected are children on the streets and those who are in institutions. I understand. However, I'm very, very proud to say that Andhra Pradesh, Assam, Bihar, and Delhi have consistently reported, because there is some awareness over there. Just because a state says, oh, we don't have anything, it doesn't mean they do not have. So we need to, this is a national study of child abuse conducted by the Juvenile Justice in collaboration of Ministry of Women and Child Welfare. And what numbers I'm telling you are validated numbers. So we have to be present, and all of us sitting here must know that, yes, we have been gone through physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. Let's not make it happen for our children ever. Whether it is in school or whether it is at home, let us make a turnover, a new leaf. Now, everybody made this hue and cry about Me Too, but it's had a slow death. There is, at least there was courage sown in the minds of women and men who've gone through this abuse, who had the courage to come out and say, yes, I was abused, but I will not allow this to happen any further. And that is all about, when we talk about child abuse, it's sexual abuse is one part which is to be really taken care of, because the trauma is as high as physical or emotional. Physical also, educators, when you hit a person, when you really, really want to shock a child, if you touch and you hit, that touch is still okay, instead of using a belt or a scale or a whatever else. Physical abuse will harm the mind as well as this thing, but emotional abuse leaves a child dented forever. Remember, your child comes to you as a plain sheet of paper in preschool. And the way you write on top of it is what he carries on for life. So for me, prevention of any abuse and awareness spread in preschool is very, very, very important, because that is the cornerstone of all education and your life. All that you learn in kindergarten is all that you do in life. You look back and you will realize what I'm saying is true. Primary and primary education builds on what you do in pre-primary. And that is why I said that I want a stalwart like Preeta ma'am from the primary and high school, and a stalwart like Leena ma'am from the preschool, where I know that they're laying strong foundations. I've seen how they practice what they preach. And I would like all of you to be aware of this and make it a point at the end of the seminar that, yes, this is one point that I've learned from the session, and I will always practice it in my school systems. Can we move on, please? So in a school system, if a child tells you that other child came kissing me, a child tells you that there is an adult who is fondling him, or a child is fondling his private parts excessively, a child tells you that the teacher did something which made him feel uncomfortable, you think about it, current situation, what will you do? There will be so many thoughts which comes into your mind. And one very important practice that I followed as a principal, there was this one time during the short break and the long break, I would give the child time. Primary children were allowed to come to me in the short break without any appointment. And during the break, I would not meet any teacher, any official, anybody. The primary children would come to me in the short break, and the secondary children would come to me in the lunch break. As leaders, as teachers, have a mentoring buddy system where you are ensuring that the child has one person in this entire school system or in this entire world where you can say that I can go talk to my principal. And I'm very proud to say that even today, when I see my students, they say, Nithya ma'am, we could come and tell you things which we couldn't tell my parent. There was this one child who was lured into, she was a very good-looking girl. And there was this mall being constructed near the school where I was heading in Mumbai. And, these boys, and there was a college next to it. And one of the most dangerous things is to have a school next to a college where, you have these young giggly girls and you have these boys, and that is potential danger, which you can't help. And this child comes to me and tells me, she says, Nithya ma'am, I've missed my periods. And no, she didn't say, she said, I'm scared I will miss my periods. And I froze. I just didn't know what to do. I froze. And she says, ma'am, I trust you, but do not tell my parents. And this is her situation. So I didn't know what I went through a lot of tight rope. I don't think I have prayed ever so much than I did ever at that point of time. And well, she didn't get her periods. That's a different matter. But then I had to handle it so carefully. It's like a thin chiffon sari which has fallen over barbed wire. Whichever way you take the chiffon sari, it will tear. So you have to be so careful that the fabric of the child's trust in you is like that chiffon sari. She's trusted you and she's told you that, ma'am, this has happened. I've made a mistake. I didn't know why I did it, but I was lured into it. I made a mistake and I'm scared. So how do you protect the child? How do you correct the perpetrator who is also another child? And how do you help the parents understand that you don't even know what your child is up to? And how do you tell your counselor to counsel this child and keep this within yourself as a principal is not easy. So it's very important that you start talking about it and building awareness, then wait for such situations. The next one. So most important is and another thing is listening to elders is fine. But when an elder And another very important point I want all of you to encourage to understand, children to understand, is the word secret, according to me, is not a positive word at all. Do not let your children get to habit saying that I have a secret. There is something secretive happening. So when a little child is told I have a secret, she feels very important. But no, that is the problem, and that is the beginning of the end. And we also have bada, like, like listen to your elders. And then they'll say, now don't open your mouth. The school ki izzat hai, ghar ki izzat hai. That is what we tell the children, to shut up, because don't open your mouth now that this has happened. This is going to lead us into greater trouble. Just keep quiet. Brushing under the carpet is not what is going to help any situation. Have the courage to step out and say, yes, this mistake happened. We made this, like, for example, when that child came and told me about that mall and that car and whatever she told about that, what really bothered me is there is something wrong in our system. The child had enough time to go with her school uniform and was able to have physical proximity in a car with a boy with a school uniform. So where there is some lapse in security somewhere, either the mall fellow should have stopped young girls coming with uniform. Where did the parent go? Why did the parent not question the child does not come home? Even if she has said gone to the tuition teacher, which tuition? There is a complete loophole where people take advantage. And never tell a child, like, because I say so, you listen, or because I say so, you keep quiet. And when a child comes and tells you that he pinched me on my bottom or he touched my private part, don't ask the child, what proof do you have? What will the child tell? Somebody has touched and gone and he felt uncomfortable. He's come back to you and you'll ask him, what proof do you have? Or you say, "Theek hai na, wo crowd mein tha, to aise," or you wore this dress, naturally they'll touch you. No. Forget it, it happens, you can't forget it. I'm telling you, all of you who are listening, the 101 of you, today too will not forget an unsafe touch that you have felt. You will never ever forget the creepy touch till you go to your grave. Trust me on this. An incorrect touch, a human being can never forget. So don't say bhul jao. When you are not able to forget, how do you think a child is going to forget? Secondly, how do you express your physical body language? Don't express shock. What we do, this is what happened. Then what happened? Who did it? Why did it happen? No. And then I'm not going to believe you. Kuch bhi bolte ho tum. Kuch bhi karte ho. And then don't rationalize, don't justify the action. One most important thing is there are sometimes some of the uncles and aunts who visit us have a very funny way of petting children. The child may not like it. He may not like his cheeks being touched. He may not like being hugged by that fellow, whatever. Don't say that, hey, this is my uncle. How can you tell him that don't touch me? Don't prioritize your child's relationship. Don't prioritize your relationship or whatever the child is saying. Don't panic. And don't force the child to talk overtly. That's not going to help. And don't make the child repeat the story. Suppose the child has come and told the mother or the sister. The sister cannot say, chalo papa ke paas bolo, chalo mama ke paas bolo, chalo dadi ma ke paas bolo, chalo principal ke paas bolo, chalo. How many times will the child be reliving the story if he has been abused, even if he's been beaten, if he's been spoken rudely, or if he's had a sexual abuse? And never confront the offender in front of the child. Don't try to do a bravado thing. Chalo, abhi baat karte hain. Aapke samne hi usko sikhate hain. No. These things will never ever work in these contexts. I'm telling you, always remember a chiffon sari on barbed wire, and how are you going to remove the chiffon without a single tear? That is how sensitive a child's mind is when he's gone through some kind of abuse. So teachers, be very careful of this. So how do we prevent sexual abuses? To empower children with enough knowledge and make them aware of potential dangers and teach them the circle of trust. Extremely important. And never ever leave a child unattended. Like how Leena ma'am was saying that, try not to send a child alone as far as possible. Of course, one more thing we need to be very careful is, at any given point of time, you cannot make it appear that the world is a bad place for children. The world is not a bad place at all. There are a whole lot of good people living in this world. There are a whole lot of positive people living in this world. However, there are shades of gray. You have to be present to the shades of gray. And we need to teach children to protect themselves. You cannot say that everybody is bad, the whole world is bad. No, the world is not bad. There are some people in this world who are not good for children. And that is what we need to make children powerful with their thoughts.
So Nitya ji, when
Yeah.
you talk about empowering children, right?
Yeah.
What are like some of the first steps that can be taken? What is the scope of empowerment that we're looking at? What are the different areas that school leaders and teachers might need to touch upon? Also keeping in mind the different the age levels perhaps of the children.
So that's a good question. What I'm saying is, the most important point that we need to keep in mind is when the ability, the life skill, in fact, to stay safe, according to me, is a life skill. And this life skill has to be woven either into the curriculum, or it has to, you can, if you have, like earlier days, we used to have as children, and even me as when we run schools, we have what is known as a moral science period. It's not about teaching them morals. It's not about, this has to be an integral part of the school system, where there is a talk about this in different forms, age appropriate way, like how you have a curriculum for your math and science. You need to have a personal safety curriculum. At every age, at every stage, a child has to be empowered with information, has to be empowered with awareness of what is happening around, and has to be empowered with the ability to safeguard his own self.
And ma'am, excuse me, above all, no?
Yeah. Come again?
No, ma'am, one point I would like to tell in this regard.
Yeah.
The child should get the confidence that if he says, there is somebody to listen and take up the action.
Okay.
Most of the cases, what I feel is children are scared to share it with the teachers or with the parents. Wherever I worked in my school, children, they have got a very good room with me to share each and everything. So they never used to share such things. So we should empower the children with that knowledge that there are somebody to share, and whatever may be the consequences, the child should be ready to speak out. That awareness we have to give to the children.
So that is the managing the circle of trust. So what we do is, even in preschool or in high school, one of the first things that we do during the personal safety education session is to draw their circle of trust in concentric circles. Who is the most important in the inner circle? It could be the mother, father, grandmother, whoever lives with the child, whom the child trusts, or a friend. Then the next circle, suppose they are not available, who else will you go to? Then the next circle, if they are not available, who else will you go to? But most important in this circle of trust, educators, we have to be or conduct ourselves in such a way that the child has somebody in school to trust.
To share with.
To share with. It could be a buddy teacher, it could be a friend, it could be the principal, it could be the counselor. But the school plays a very, very critical role in the circle of trust. And that is something you have to train the child to understand. Trust building is a very important exercise. Yes. And I think you can forgive anybody in this world, but a person who has broken the trust of a child. I mean, I think I can forgive anyone, but one who has broken the trust of a child is something I think is, for me, I know as an educator, I should not be saying it. For me, it is unpardonable and non-negotiable. Yes. Anything can be broken, but not the trust which a child has kept in you. Very, very, you shattered his world, and he will learn never to trust people around him.
So also coming to where Aditya, your question was regarding how do we do it in school, and like how Ma'am Nitya and Ma'am Preeta mentioned about how we talk to children about it and build a circle of trust. The same thing is replicated and very easily replicated even in preschool levels. It's just that when we are doing it in preschool levels, we need to do it in a more age appropriate manner. So it becomes more like games. So to give you a few examples, it's like in the curriculum, we have activities, and I'm sure you all must be knowing about it, especially preschoolers. They love to play the game, What If? Yeah. So you start with fun situations like what if you lose a toy, and then go to different situations. Or what if you lose your way? Or what if you're going into the lift and you're alone? And gradually, as they grow older and they start, like in the first month, it's about what if you losing your toy, then what if you lose your way, and gradually move to situations like what if someone is touching you in this manner. Yeah, so obviously we do give them we do have physical education where we talk to them about the body parts which are private, and with very simple examples like when you're going into the swimming pool, you still wear something. Why is that? Why do you wear that? Why don't you remove all your clothes? Because those are your private parts. So when you go to the beach, what are the different clothes that you wear? Yeah, so that's how they learn that, okay, these are parts which are completely mine and no one can even see them or touch them. And then gradually move to games like, what if someone touches you here or asks you? So that is how we incorporate that in the curriculum as a part of circle time. Like how for older kids, we have moral science and things, life skills. So we have like a circle time for the preschoolers, and that's when they do it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so any thoughts, I'm just trying to see 3 questions which have come. So there is this one very interesting question, like do not assume that parents don't care or parents need counseling. Maybe it is presumptuous on our part. Maybe if we do approach it differently, people with an open mind, with an attitude that we are in this together, I think that's a very, very valid point, which has been made. I do not know the name, it says BS. I think it's an excellent point where you say that, look at it, that together, we are taking the child into a bright future. It's not about me or you, or it's not that I know and you do not know. And it needs to be a collaborative effort. I think that's a wonderful point that has been made. The other question is chairman or chairperson. It doesn't matter. What I mean to say is from the leader who's leading the organization to the person who's going to open the door every day for the child to enter, he or she, all of them must be aware of the importance of child safety and the laws that govern the same. And the last one says, I'm not sure if children come with a mind that is like a plain paper. I believe they come with certain notions. And also the notion that a blank slate has led to many ills that we today experience in education. Is probably something that how do we change deep-seated ideas, which is it's a good question too. When I mean as a plain sheet of paper, I mean they come in with a lot of hope, with a lot of expectations, and with a lot of enthusiasm. So the way we deal with them leaves a mark in their mind. As I always say, it's not about how, when you look back, you will always recall moments when you felt happy. You will always remember how people made you feel. And that is what I meant when I say, I'm not saying that children are clay, that you can mold them, children are a piece of paper, you can write on them. That's not what I meant. Here I'm talking completely about the emotional security that we need to give children when they come into our systems. That's what I meant. And there's another question which says, how do you build a circle of trust and how can teachers do that? Well, that is something which can be done. We have, like how Leena ma'am just explained, how teachers are trained to do the circle time. The circle time, my dear educators, and Preeta ma'am also does it in her school, I know for sure, is the first 10 minutes when the children are all gathered around. And I'm very happy to say some of the schools today do not have the prayer system as such, because that is done in the class. It's a more intensive, intimate system they have in the classrooms where they have a circle time and the children open up. And when the children open up, that leads to conversation. And suppose a child wants to say something and you find it's not inappropriate to be said in public, the teacher or the principal will say, can we talk this later? Come and meet me and we can take this. And sometimes it's really sad. There are children who get beaten up at home. And then that's why we do a visual scanning. Whether it is Leena in her preschools or whether it is Preeta ma'am in her schools, there is a visual scanning which they train the teachers to do. Like, is there a mark or is there a physical mark, or what is the temperature? Now, of course, for COVID is done, but even earlier there was a scan where we'll know that something is not right with the child. If he's looking sad, or if he's looking, grumpy, something must have gone wrong, and that has to be attended to. So once you show so much care, automatically the circle of trust builds up. And that is important.
Sometimes, sometimes in regard of this trust, I would like to share, even in the school, it's happened. Children are not that much, what should I say, dare enough to share certain things to me in the presence of teachers. They're having a feeling that if I say something about this particular teacher, the teacher may take it as a revenge and the teacher may do something to me. So what I have done is, first of all, I made them sure that no teacher will take it as a revenge and do anything against them. But still, in order to give them little confidence, because of course we have to give them room to share their feelings. Otherwise, it will be suppressed a lot. So what I have done is, we fixed certain corners in the campus. Certain corners are for particular class, and I used to stand there casually, and they used to come in break and other recess periods. They used to come and share the things with me. When I stand there, children, they know very clearly. Only it is between me and students. Students know very clearly that ma'am is standing there for us. So like that, different corners are fixed in my school for different classes. That is what I did. Then I can share the feelings with the teachers. And now, of course, after this 3 months continuous training, my teachers are now open up with the students. They are almost like friendly relationship. We can change the teachers, but it will take little time because they are also youngsters.
Yeah. So, and so when we look at the PSC integration in special classes, like exactly like how Ms. Leena and Ms. Preeta shared, it has to be seamlessly integrated. Like whether it is a swimming pool situation or whether it's a water play situation, or whether it is in this, like suppose, for example, you're talking about, say like the Red Riding Hood example was given, or when you're talking about, there are so many stories or so many incidents where you can teach a child personal safety education. Another favorite example of mine, for like how we do in our schools, where I help create curriculum, is when you're teaching a child something heavy or light, or that sinking or floating, and when you're making him observe that this fruit sinks, that fruit floats, you will be able to enable the child see that when an orange with its skin is made to float in a glass of water, it floats happily. The minute you remove the peel, it sinks. So in the concept of floating, you can explain that why did the orange with the skin float? Because there is so much more air. The buoyant force is so much more. The water it displaces is lesser than what it actually, so it's able to float. When you peel the skin, the air is not there for it to be able to float. It sinks. So you tell the child that if you're going to get affected by what people think of you, what people talk about you, you will sink. You will get a sinking feeling. Yeah. But whereas when you're learning to protect yourself with saying that I am good, I am safe, I have people whom I can trust, I don't care what you're talking to me about. This is not easy, friends. It takes time, but it is achievable. It is not impossible. It takes time. But you have to teach the child to protect himself physically, mentally. Very, very important. And that personal safety education integration has to be done seamlessly. That in the preschools, I know, I mean, Leena can add value in her curriculum. In every part, she would have had something to add about, in maths, like when they're talking about sharing, when there is subtraction or when there is addition, there will be a value spoken about in related to personal safety. And if there is something about a story, where we do fairy tales retold, there will be something more that is added about personal safety. In everything, there is one PSC aspect woven in the flow of the lesson and curriculum, for sure, whether it is high school or whether it is preschool. It's very, very important. And then the next is child protection policy. Now, one thing which I learned overseas, to be very honest. Now, of course, India has also introduced it. But this I learned very many years ago, where schools abroad do not even give you license. Government doesn't give you license for your school if you do not have a child protection policy. Child protection policy is the do's and don'ts about the entire process. Like, say, for example, I know that in my preschool, where the child will go when he or she has a problem. The child is aware, the parent is aware. And how finally it may in the preschool system, like what Miss Leena is heading, finally it may come back to her, where she'll find a solution or she will prevent it from happening, whichever way. Same way, it will come back to Preeta ma'am. All the school systems and preschool systems must have a stated protection policy that this is the protocol we follow. And it has to be put up on the website. What I would like most of you to go to is read the various child protection policies that many schools have put up now. And it is a word of promise that you're giving to the child, to the parent, to society. So tomorrow when I look for admission for my granddaughter, my first thing is I don't care about the results of the school. I don't care about whether it's a rank holder or not. That's least of my concern. For me, is my child being protected and taken care of. If that is done properly, everything will fall in place. If it is a safe school, everything, a child is happy. Everything will fall in place. So child protection policy is something all of us educators must create for our school, depending upon the local availability of resources, local expertise, whatever it is. And the next is, do you have a student? It's a complaint, it's not a very positive connotation. Maybe we can say we shouldn't look at the child whining or complaining. It is more of a student feedback process. Do you have a student feedback process in your systems? We'll share one which we follow in our schools. Maybe Aditya, you could show the flow chart.
Ma'am, there's also a question. Someone has asked if the child policy is there on Google.
Yes. But you can't take any Google policy and put, you'll have to create your own based on reading everything. You can get inspired by what protection policies are available, but you have to tailor it to your personal school situation.
Perhaps what we could do is also, with your support and knowing that you have worked on various child protection policies, create a kind of a template or a list of triggers that they might have to then consider in order to populate the policy that they're working towards.
Yeah, in ours, correct. I agree, Aditya. And in our school systems, we have what is known as the red, amber, green matrix, where in all the SOPs that we give, this is the flow chart, like the student identifies the issues. And then what happens is, if it is something very simple, like a lost water bottle or my homework not finished, somebody stole my book, something else happened, it could be a green issue, but the green could also end up being an amber and red. So when you identify the problem, there is taken action, then what is the outcome? If there is a resolve, that is fine. If it is not resolved, where do they escalate? If you tell a child, this is what you have to follow step by step for you to find a solution, he knows that every problem of his will have a solution. And he feels safe. It's not about answering a government, whether you have a student feedback process, whether you have that process. It is not about that. It is about, do you believe in this? Do you believe that every child in your school must have no problem? Whether it is a loss of a water bottle or whether it is a loss of not being able to understand the subject, or whether he has been touched inappropriately. Like, get out of the classroom, go and stand outside. It doesn't work. I have also been a teacher from 1978. And to be honest, young as I was, maybe I have also made these mistakes where you raise, I think the loudest words ever uttered in any school system is keep quiet. We want everyone to keep quiet, but you'll hear the teacher shout, keep quiet, keep quiet. It doesn't work. We've all gone through that, but now, as you grow, you learn, you understand better psychology. And this flow chart, if each one of you can make for your respective schools and teach the child the escalation matrix of red, amber, green, it will be a huge support for the system. So could we go to the next one, Aditya? Yeah. And why do you tell leaders are, how many of us as principals believe that we are quasi-parents? Do you know that? I'm sure all of you know, I shouldn't be assuming and presumptuous that you don't know, that we, like say, for example, of course, the role of Preeta ma'am is even more difficult because she's the head of a residential school. Nonetheless, quasi-parents is, even when there is a litigation, even when there is a serious problem in the role of a child, the court approaches the school principal, and the word of the principal has immense value in the court of law. So you are the chief and main protector of children in school. And this credit, or this, what do I say? It's this huge responsibility is vested on school principals, because children up to 18 are considered as those who need care. Of course, we have children only up to the 12th, they may be 16, 17 nonetheless, but as quasi-parents, you have an immense responsibility in playing a big role in the support of a child's growth and learning. So why am I saying this? In school systems, sometimes when teachers lose it, they say, you're such a good for nothing. And you'll say, इसमें क्या बड़ी बात है? When we were young, हमको इतना मार खाया हम लोग. They called us donkey, they called us monkey. No, those days have gone. Maybe if you were not called a donkey or monkey, you would have been a better person today. We do not know. And like, if you don't do the homework, I'll throw you out of the class. If you don't do this, I'll cut 5 marks from that. If you're bribing, if words worthless, yelling, and giving the silent treatment, all this doesn't work. So as a principal, we need to ensure that we have a collaboration with parents as well as with teachers, that we all speak right. We all say the right choice of words when we want to correct the child. Nobody is saying don't correct the child. We are only saying use positive terms to correct the child. That is the only difference. Like you don't tell a child, don't lie. You are a liar. Instead, you can say that, I don't think you're speaking the truth, my dear son. Can we just look into it? Take time and get back to me. Same sentence, you put a positive connotation, it hurts less. And that's what matters. Instead of saying you're good for nothing, you could possibly say you're good. Maybe you're not trying hard enough. And the reason why I'm saying is, all of us in positions, and there are some of our school systems which has a stage where the teacher is considered like a sage on stage. No, you are not a sage on stage at all. You have to be a guide by the side for every child. And I'm so proud that across so many years, there are some things which I don't feel humble at all about. One is, I take great pride in saying that I have never allowed a child to fail ever. Somehow I will ensure that the child is able to cross the examination system or serve the examination system. Some who are bright do it, but some who are not able to do it need guidance. And trust me, exams and question papers are not big deal. It's no big deal. You have to just understand the system to help a child surf through. And that's what I did. And I'm so proud to say that I've never allowed a child, as I always told Aditya, in my epitaph, they will write that here lies a woman who never allowed a child to fail. Similarly, when it is not about it is all about how we make people feel, how we make a child feel, how we make a teacher feel. And to be honest, educators, I have also had my shares of mistakes where, I was just sharing the other day with Ms. Chitra and Aditya that I was running a factory. Literally, I had 5,500 children in my school. I had 100 divisions. I had 32 buses. And there were times when I would call the name of the teacher over the intercom. And the children, when they passed out, I had one system which worked very well for me. In the 10th standard and the 12th standard, when the kids used to pass out, I would have an exclusive session only with the principal, where nobody else would be present, only me and them. As they were leaving the school, I wanted to know what did they do for the last 12 years in my school, what went right and what went wrong. And the children gave me this feedback. They said, Nithya ma'am, please do not call a teacher over the intercom. So we would all immediately say, unko vaat lag gaya, unko to pakada gaya, aaj dekho kya hoga. So that, she says, don't mention names over intercom. And don't do it, especially when we're leaving for school or when school is in action. Because for us, it's a large school. You can't walk around. You can't find the teacher where she is. We didn't have mobiles at one point of time. But nonetheless, what I did was not right. I know how the teacher could have felt every time her name was mentioned. So there is feedback which you get from children where all of us have to be present to their self-worth. And many things they told me, ma'am, you think you would threaten us saying we won't give you hall ticket. We know you have nothing to do with the hall ticket and us. It is between us and the government. If a child didn't study or if a child didn't say anything, we'll say we won't give you hall ticket. We won't give it. It was such a joke. After that, educators, I never said these things, never. I learned all this from my own children who left. So all of us have an intent, we have an action, and we have an outcome. Our intent may be right. Maybe what I said was also right. What you say is also right. But the action may be wrong. And therefore, the outcome is based not on the intent. It is directly proportional to the action. So whatever you say, whatever you do, remember that the intent, action, and outcome have to be aligned.
So what I would like to add here for the preschoolers again is like they are unable to really express themselves and give this kind of feedback. But like Ma'am Nithya said, that our actions are really important and how we make them feel. So keep one thing in mind. And as a teacher, I have seen this. I have been a preschool teacher initially. I started my career. Is that children actually give you what you expect from them? Yes, they actually follow and they do it because that's what they know that, okay, teacher is going to expect this from me. And I have seen that when I learned this, it made a major difference to children. There were children, right? In my first year as a teacher, I wasn't like the know-all teacher. So there were a few kids who would never listen and wouldn't sit in one place and would be jumping around. It was a senior KG class. And each time I would ask questions to children who I knew would answer, and I wouldn't ask the ones who are jumping around because I didn't expect them to answer. And of course, I did have a mentor, and we always have mentors like Ma'am Nithya. And when I learned about it, I gradually started changing my attitude towards the kids, and I started asking the other kids also questions. And I saw that gradually it did make a difference because then they knew, okay, I'm also going to be asked, so let me pay attention. Yeah, before that they knew that anyways teacher mere se to puchne nahi wali hai, let me jump around. So when my attitude changed, the amount of change I saw in those kids made a lot of a difference. So kids actually give what is expected out of them. So if we are going to expect them not to answer, because our attitude becomes like this towards them. So if we expect them not to answer, they will not answer. We expect them to fool around, they will fool around. That's the reason why you always see, we all always see a repetition in behavior. Yeah, we go on promoting positive behavior, and so those kids go on repeating the positive behavior, and we just ignore the ones whom we don't want. I mean, since they are making a mess in the class, and that's the reason why they feel ignored and they continue that behavior. So if you're all going to change our attitude, it makes a lot of a difference, especially to the little one.
Yeah, Preeta ma'am, do you have anything to share about intent, action, and outcome? Preeta ma'am? So,
am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah.
Yes.
If you have any examples like how we shared about intent, action, and outcome, your intent may be good, but one incorrect step by way of us as leaders and teachers can have a very incorrect outcome. Like how Leena
Yeah.
shared her experience, I shared mine. Do you have an experience to share about intent, action, and outcome? How they
Yes,
need to
ma'am.
be aligned?
No,
Yeah.
actually, if we call a child, usually when I was in UP, the prominent word that the teachers used to use is Buddhu. You are a Buddhu. Understood that that word really made an impact in one of my students' mind. Uh, the same student is now with me in the school. Madam, already I discussed with Madam about Ishan. He is an autistic child. But after that, he was not ready to sit in that teacher's class. He was saying that that teacher always used to call me Buddhu. So just imagine a simple word, Buddhu. It's not a simple word, of course. I just removed that teacher from the class because if a teacher is calling a child Buddhu, the teacher failed to understand the child. And the teacher, of course, I should not say nobody should be hurted, but I want to say openly that if a teacher is calling a child Buddhu or waste in the class, I will consider the teacher as such as a waste because the teacher failed to understand the child. If I say a teacher is not capable, I can say that I will become a failure in understanding the teacher. There will be some ups and downs in every human being, in every child. It is the capacity of we elders or the teachers or the headships to understand that capacity and polish it. So
Yeah,
that the
very, very
weakness of
well
the
said.
child,
Yeah,
the
very, very
negativity
well
of the
said.
child will be covered up.
I think the point which Preeta ma'am made now is very, very important. You need to set non-negotiables in the professional development when we train the teachers. What are the non-negotiables in your school? As a leader, I am not going to tolerate this. It is a non-negotiable for me. End of conversation. You cannot call a child by name. And there are very few reflective teachers, like the example which Leena ma'am gave us. She started reflecting. Okay, what did I do that this is happening? I have been a reflective principal because I acted on the feedback that was given to me by my children, that your intent may have been this, but the outcome was not. So we need to create reflective teachers, reflective systems, and we have to put down on pen and paper. It is non-negotiable. In fact, in our appointment order, when we are given, and there is a code of conduct which everybody signs. For example, I know for a fact that there is a code of conduct where our preschool systems do, and a code of conduct where the high school system does, where we clearly mention intent. What is an enabling action? How is it to build self-esteem? What is an abusive action? And how is it that low self-esteem is the result? Now, remember, whenever an adult is abusive, he has very low self-esteem. An adult who is considerate, an adult who is loving, an adult who is caring has high self-esteem. Now, just because the children told me, Nitya ma'am, the way you did, it didn't matter for us, because if I had a low self-esteem, I would have felt hurt. But because my self-esteem is in place, I say, okay, there is a point in what the child is saying. It's very, very important, educators, to have your esteem in place if you want to create an abuse-free environment for children. Absolutely important. You cannot say that I also went through this. You went through it, you went through it. Okay, I feel sorry about it. Doesn't mean that you'll have to repeat it. You cannot call a child, what a donkey you are, and you're a buffalo. There are teachers who do that. There are principals who do that. And they say, no, apna hi bache hai. I have seen him from the time he's 3 years old. Sorry, it doesn't work anymore. The most important is in professional development, more than anything else, we have to build this self-confidence and self-esteem of teachers. They must know how to act on feedback, especially from children. So what I think is the pledge that all of us as educators must take today is my favorite, like, what do I say? I was telling Mr. Aditya the other day that I live and die by this, always initiate in all our training. Could we go to the pledge, Aditya sir? 50 years from now, it really doesn't matter what kind of car you drove, what kind of house you lived in, how much you had in your bank account, or what clothes you look like. But the world may be a little better place because you were important in the life of a child. Remember, We are working with human minds. And remember that the legacy you leave behind is what gift you can give a child to live in a safe and happy world. And this is so important for us, so important that all our teachers, all our principals try and do their best to live this way, to be important in the life of a child by creating a happy, caring, learning environment for the child. And that is what all of us are here in it for.
Absolutely. Very, very vital words, Nitya ji. On that note, there is a couple of minutes that we have. Panelists, I know you've been sharing your strategies, ideas, and thoughts throughout the webinar so far. But if there are any specific things you'd like to share that we may not have touched upon or that you'd like to elaborate on, now is the time. So Preeta ma'am, Leena ma'am, or even Nitya ji, if there's anything you would like to further add on to what
The
we've
one
discussed.
point I would just like to add, the reason why I even selected Ms. Preeta and Ms. Leena for this is I have literally seen them walk their talk about their passion for children. Like I know for certain that even if a particular worksheet was not right, or if a teacher said something incorrect, I know for certain that Leena will react. And I welcome that reaction. Whether it was a nanny ma, or whether it was somebody at the door, or whether it was, I have seen her react, and I welcome such reactions because that shows the care that they have, Similarly with Preeta ma'am, I know how angry she could get. I know the phone calls we've had and the anger that she emanates when she sees something go wrong. And for me, in Tamil, there is a saying, Avayar saying, which says that Raudram Kul, that is get angry. And educators, I have two people who get angry if something goes wrong. And I'm proud to say that. I know otherwise I tell them cool down. Both can get angry for a lot of things, but I'm so proud that they get angry for this. And I want all my principals to get angry when a child is not attended to. Raudram Kol for me is a virtue of a leader who says, I'll stand up for what is right for a child no matter what. And I've seen this in action. I'm not trying to kind of flatter them, but I would never have had them in this panel if they were not people who walk their talk. Trust me on this. They are people who walk their talk, and I know that I feel very safe. I know that if she's angry, she'll attend to it and it will get done. Anger is important as leaders, especially in preschool, more than even high school, because they are babies. And I want you to be angry for what goes wrong with a child. That is my one single line message. And remember to leave a legacy in the mind of a child.
So the anger is important to fuel the drive or the need to bring about a change. But just as important is also to take that anger and channel it into something productive and something that sustains across all areas of the school system. Fantastic. Leena ji or Preeta ji, is there anything you'd like to add on?
So over a few years, after working with the preschoolers, one of the things what I realized was that we do focus a lot on teacher development programs. And
that's
of course,
well said,
I don't deny
that's very
that
important.
that's very, very important. But somewhere down, we must also start focusing a lot on development of the ancillary stuff. That's because as preschoolers, they pick up and they learn from everybody, every adult that they see in their life. So even an ancillary or a security who's doing something, they pick that up. They pick up those actions, they pick up the way they talk. And ancillary does help a lot in class when it comes to snack time, before snack time, cleaning up, picking up bowls, using the washroom, handing over kids. So I think we should start focusing a lot even on ancillary staff development, which we are doing at our end. So this is a suggestion for. And of course, like I have already given a lot of tips during the session, that it's very, very aware that children right from an early age learn about physical development and safety by doing these games. I think Ma'am Nitya also spoke to you about the retelling of stories. So when we retell stories, it's the main focus comes on personal safety. Like she particularly gave an example of Red Riding Hood. So it is majorly focused on why should we, what's the reason as to why we shouldn't be speaking to strangers. Or when we talk about the lion and the mouse was worried about his own safety, before he went to the lion. So those are a lot of ways in which we could incorporate safety things with kids.
Thank
And
you.
of course, through these games, they pick up. Yeah, they pick up a lot. They enjoy it. So it becomes a very natural process for them. It's not something scary. So when you do these if games and stories, it's not that they get scared, but it just becomes okay, this is a part of life. How I'm learning letter A, in the same way I'm learning not to talk to a stranger. So it becomes, like a mutual thing.
Yeah.
So in terms of the professional development of teachers, for example, it's then important for the teacher to not only have the knowledge of what areas encompass personal safety education, like what is the scope, what are the things I need to touch upon, but what is even more critical is the skill to then make those connections and bring it into a kind of like seamless integration, as Nitya ji had also talked about, knowing when, at what point I can. And I think that's a great trigger for me, someone who works on professional development modules and workshops, to look at that as a very critical aspect of our own modules and scope of what we do with teachers as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leena. Preeta ma'am, anything for you to say? I think the biggest credit, the school systems which they have said is, I know I have heard parents say, or even their bosses say, like, Preeta madam hai kya? To problem nahi hai. Leena madam hai kya? To problem nahi hai. See, that is what is the ultimate litmus test for a school system. If they say that what principle hai na, theek hai. That if you have created, you have arrived. Trust me on this. After running schools in remote mode, physical mode, every mode, when you know that there is a safe person for school, then the system is in place. Everything falls in place. And that, as Aditya said, most important is teacher training. Professional development, as she said, right from, I'm telling you, chairperson to the door person. That is the way forward.
So when it comes to the as Leena ji talked about, like the ancillary staff, so the people who help around the school, maybe in the canteen or the bus service, etc. What do the interventions look like? Do you have special sessions with them? How does it work? What is the frequency with which you have such sessions?
Just as much as we focus on the teachers, it's literally as much as that. It's the same. I mean, that's because probably at times it's even more, because see, for an ancillary, to just randomly give you an example, scratching in a body part is not incorrect, right? So they just walking, they do it, they don't even realize it. So in a daily basis, we sit and we observe, and maybe every 15 days have like a half an hour session with them, putting down the notes. Like when I'm walking, I literally see, like for an ancillary, she might even pick up a fruit from the floor and theek hai, kha liya. So these are the things which when I'm taking my rounds, I keep in mind, and I quickly make a note of it and then have sessions. So there are times when in fact I need to have more sessions with them as compared to the teachers, because for teachers, when they're doing these things, they at least know that okay, this action might not be appropriate, but the ancillary don't realize it. I'm not saying that they're wrong, but the culture that they're coming up from, they don't find it incorrect. So it is something that we need to guide them on. So it's
so an important point that you mentioned is also then that this is something that you're consciously looking out for while doing maybe like your observation rounds. So maybe you have a trigger list with you, or a kind of some sort of questions or parameters that you're looking for specifically when you are doing such observations.
Yes.
For example, in our own Chrysalis partner schools, we have emotional safety as a transformation area that we focus on. So the vocal, verbal, the visual language, the narrative that the teacher is having in her class, what kind of emotional safety is it bringing about? Those are also some parameters that we look at. So perhaps extending it to other areas as well across all the school systems would be an important starting point there.
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah.
One common area that I've seen emerging in the chat and in the questions that are coming up is also with respect to parent engagement, right? Nitya ji and all of you have also talked about the need to have a kind of a common language or an approach in the way that we, maybe take up certain things, the positivity that we bring about in the messaging that we give, the awareness that we bring in. Could you also help us understand what are some of the specific things that you do in terms of engaging with parents and bringing them on board?
So there is this, what we call as a pact. We call it as parents and children together. And teachers, we call it as, we have parents and children along with teachers. You call it whatever. You can take integrated, motivated parents and caring teachers as impact program or a pact program, where you have, as she said, as Lena pointed out, and as Preeta ma'am also said, training is not once. You cannot say once is done. No. It has to be continuous and periodic, and the same language has to be used everywhere. And if you tell the teacher that don't lie, say you're not speaking the truth, the mother cannot go home and say you're lying, you're a liar. That kind of conflicting emotions will not work for a child. So as I said, we both are holding two hands of a child and walking along the same path. We are not across the table. You cannot, I really like the comment from one of the teachers who attended, said that you're not on one side, I'm not on one side. We are in it together. So that we have calendared parent sessions regularly, calendared, class 4, I mean, I shouldn't be calling them, but that's a technical term. You have those support staff system, you have ancillary staff system, you have staff who are on contract. Like when we get our buses on contract, that fellow changes the contract and we don't know who's come. Then again, those contract fellows have to be trained. So there is you have to calendar your PD. In every school calendar, like how you have your tests and annual exams calendared, you calendar your professional development with respect to PSC. You have other professional development, but child safety norms are also important. We do it calendared and it has to be periodically done. You cannot do once and leave it. They have to be reminded, like how she said, an ancillary staff can, kind of try and scratch his private part in front of the child, not realizing what he or she is doing. It doesn't work. And we have to follow through. And you must have corrective action, especially if there is going to be a deviation in what you promised the child. It is important to have corrective actions. Like I've gone to the extent of, I'm sorry to use the word, but I've dismissed even my teachers on the spot for doing a non-negotiable act pertaining to a child. On the spot with due settled. So they must know there is a consequence for anything that goes wrong with the child. Same way children also have to be trained. All children are not angels. Some of them can lie through their teeth, but we will have to be aware of that. But those are few and far between. By and large, what a child says, especially when it comes to abuse, it has been scientifically proven that it can never be the untruth. Never.
One of the things that we spoke about in conversation was the school leadership unit as counselors. So upskilling themselves in order to play that role. How does it work in your schools? Have you gone through extensive training to upskill yourself to be
I think
the counselor?
Preeta ma'am can take this question because she must have attended all the CBSE workshops. And in fact, Aditya, government does a lot. And they do a lot. It's just that it doesn't reach the right thing. Preeta ma'am, if you can take that question.
I think ma'am may be having issues with unmuting. Let's see if I can.
She's
do
muted.
it. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, if I say about my case, just because of such issues, I thought of taking MSc Psychology and postgraduate diploma in managing learning disability. The thing is that when I was in Navodaya, every time now and then I used to get remedial training. I was not aware of the reason why it's coming like that. Later, I understood that the children, those who are backbenchers, the so-called weak students, are not really weak students. They have got their capacity in certain areas, but we failed. As a teacher, I felt myself a failure in understanding them. Later, when I have taken up this headships, then I understood it's a must for me to understand my teachers. If I am not able to understand the psychology of my teachers, I will be a failure as a head of the institution. So it's a must that first the headship should be a counselor, a good counselor. The moment we step into the school, we can see different faces of the teachers. They have got their own family problems. They have got their own worries. And the other side, we can see the parents having their own problems. And the other side, children are waiting for the teachers to get something new. But these problems sometimes happen to be a headache for the children even. Don't mistake me, but openly I want to discuss regarding this. So as a counselor, keeping as apart the post of the principal, I used to be a counselor for my teachers, my parents, and even for my students. So teachers, I used to say, once you decide to step into the classroom, dear teachers, keep a smiling face, because your children are awaiting for you to see that, not the burden of your problems. Whatever problems you are having, you just come and shower it on me. I'm here to take it up. So this is the confidence that I used to give to my teachers. And I'm sure that my teachers are having a very, very pleasant time with my children. It's my promise to my kids.
That's great to hear, and I'm sure it's a lot on everybody to then be the recipient of all of that. But which is why it's important to know how to receive that information, how to deal with it. I see a lot of connect with
course is still available. When we were all principals, well, I'm pushing 64 now, but a few years ago when we were principals, we were all, it was mandated that we do this guidance counseling course conducted by Government of India.
It's still
We
available.
all had to do it.
Ma'am, it's available in even Mysore University. We are having
So I think, yeah, I think what we have to do is, if it is possible that, you know, all of our schools must be, we must mandate that the principal and the leaders must do the guidance counseling course.
Yes.
It is a course which is online, which can be, in my days, it was postal course. It was correspondence course in my days. When we were principals, we had to do by correspondence. But that certificate was necessary for us. It was mandated for us. So I think everybody must do that guidance counseling course and be a good guidance counselor as a leader. It is a non-negotiable for me. If you cannot be, then don't become a leader. Don't even apply.
I have a comment here. One is, it wasn't mandatory at my point of time, but if I wanted to be effective in my profession and a happier person, I ended up going and doing it.
Yeah.
Because I would have sleepless nights. I wouldn't understand that what is it going on? Why am I not able to understand the teachers, or why are the teachers not able to, understand me? So of course I had the opportunity to do it from SNDT University. So I did a guidance counseling course from there. And then of course to add, then we did emotional quotient from Yale. But yes, as teacher, as preschool heads or principals, it's very important if we need to be effective and be calm at all times. So
I think a certificate needs to be done.
It's a must.
Yeah.
But practice is important.
Absolutely. And I think the importance of setting up processes, aligning it with the existing processes, but also ensuring that there is enough mind space also to focus on this is very key, and something that the leadership unit has to take up, because as one of the points in the chat has reminded us that there are a lot of schools which battle a lot of paperwork in general. And because of that, they're saying that of these things systemically. So it's also important perhaps to then consider how we are
Yeah, I
enabling these
think
systems.
that point is very valid, because when you ask a teacher to note down, and it is not very difficult. I think if you make it if you make the process easy, no teacher will find it difficult. If you're going to make the process as an extra work for her, then every teacher will find it difficult.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and I know somebody has written about IGNOU B.Ed having guidance and counseling. That's part of a subject. Here, this is you get trained as a leader to be a guidance counselor, which is a slightly different aspect of what I'm talking about. And well, thank you. Many of you have said it's been a very insightful session, which is very, very heartening for us as panelists. And, it's been interesting for me too.
And I think this particular point here in the chat is a great way to kind of sum up everything, which is that if people start saying the principal is a great leader, but even if he or she is not around, the system ensures our school is safe. I think that is what we are all trying to work towards.
That is the ultimate, yes.
So it is irrespective of who's there in the chair, it is a system that is thriving, functioning well, and ensuring that personal safety across the board is something that is pivotal and is important to every single process in the school system. On that note, I would like to bring the session to a close.
Thank you.
But before that, I just want to say a couple of things. One is to all our partner school leaders here, just a reminder that we have something called the Chrysalis Spotlight page on our website. So I'm adding the link here. You might be familiar with it already. Please do visit this page, because we'd love to hear from you. If there are things that you have learned during this session that you feel you can incorporate and start in your schools, this is a great platform for you to then share some of those anecdotes with the larger schools leadership team here, because then we learn from each other. We learn what works, what may not work. We may learn how to contextualize it, but more importantly, we can inspire each other to start taking up some of these things and ensure that they are thriving practices within all of our schools. I'm also sharing the link to the feedback form that will be very useful for us to understand how you felt about today's session and how we can help you in subsequent sessions as well. So on that note, I want to say a big thank you to all my panelists here. If I can just quickly summarize some of the things that I have picked up from the session today. One is POCSO awareness. So we went through the POCSO Act, ensuring that everyone who's working with the child has awareness of the act and what it entails is a great starting point. Trust building is another thing that we spoke about. How do we ensure that everyone has that comfort level to be able to reach out at appropriate times? One is ensuring that the process is in place so that we have, for example, redressal processes, feedback flows in place. So setting up all of those, the child protection policy, we will help you with the template that can be used so that you can then craft your own unique child protection policy, which must be then shared with everybody, and everyone should know exactly what the steps are. Ensure that there are certain non-negotiables that are set across the board for everybody. This is our school culture. This is the do's and the don'ts, and these are the non-negotiables, meaning we will always adhere to this come what may. And parental engagement, make that a primary focus as part of your school calendar engagement with the different support systems that you have. So having a conscious, make this an active part of your school calendar so that you are consciously looking at how to bring about awareness with parents and ensure that you're all talking from the same plane. And as some of the leadership team here has suggested, look at how perhaps you can upskill yourself as part of your own professional development, so that you are also in a position to provide the necessary guidance and counseling, or seek the support of someone who can offer that in your schools. So thank you all so much to our panelists. This has been a really powerful session, I think, for many of us.
Yeah,
to
very
really
encouraging
kickstart that
feedback,
thought
and I'm
process.
really happy that it went the way it went. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeta,
Thank
Leena,
you.
Nitya ji,
Thank you
for this.
for giving such a wonderful
No,
chance
no.
to share the feelings.
No, I think both of you are very effective practitioners, where I can proudly say, I can say that, role models in terms of child safety and child care, and it's not an exaggeration. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And just a reminder that we will see all of you again on the 23rd of October for our next webinar, which will be around problem solving. What are the tools and mindsets to overcome challenges? How do we upskill ourselves to become better problem solvers in our schools?
Okay. Thank you.
You just
So-
say 23rd October.
I don't
Yes.
think we are part of it.
You're free to be a part of it. You're absolutely welcome. And I'm sure we'll be looking for more
Bye-bye.
sessions.
Bye-bye.
Aditya, that's if you send me the links on the correct email, yeah?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Very important point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you all so
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Take care to everyone who attended.
Thank you.
Stay
Bye.
safe.
You too.